What do professional violinists, astronauts, NFL football players, and hedge funders have in common? It's a quiet group. When a violinist shows up to apply for the role of her dreams, the assessor doesn't ask her to describe how she would play a perfect note. When a head coach of an NFL football team goes to the combine, he wouldn't ask his top wide receiver to talk about how he would catch the football. And at NASA, no one would dare ask a prospective astronaut how they think about flying a space shuttle. Instead, these elite institutions watch the applicant. They watch them perform on-the-job tasks in crafted simulations to understand if they have what it takes to land the job of their dreams. At Citadel, we call this the Talent Audition, and we think it offers an unparalleled approach relative to traditional interviewing alone. So these top institutions, while they do use interviews, they don't use them alone. In their battery of tools, they run simulations, assessments, tests, some written, some physical. And today we're going to talk about how they do that to achieve their hiring goals. But across corporate America today, folks are using interviews day in and day out. And why wouldn't they? I mean, look at this picture. It's beautiful. It's a 3-on-1 panel interview. Everyone's gorgeous. Our diversity and inclusion people are thrilled. Mom and dad are happy. Look at those teeth. They're so bright. But if we take a closer look, we'll start to understand what's really happening. My friend on the left, he actually took time to read the resume before the interview today. The hiring manager is in the middle, and she knows what job she's interviewing for. Hats off, hiring manager. My friend on the right is my favorite. He's so excited to not be at his desk. He actually brought his laptop. He's going to give real-time feedback to the recruiting coordinator. Can't wait to hit send. And then we have the candidate. Well-rested, had a great breakfast, and is so eager to answer every single question that this panel has excellently. So in all seriousness, we know how difficult it can be to accurately assess talent, even under perfect conditions. As talent professionals, it's our responsibility to leverage our hiring managers, to make sure our interviewers are well prepared. Talent auditions offer an opportunity for just that. They let you structure the metrics and measures you care about so that people can leave their desk where they're very busy and have demanding day jobs and can go into a hyper-leveraged process. So let's take a quick look at what some of the world's best institutions are doing. At Juilliard, one of the top fine arts institutions, only 7% of applicants are admitted. That means that at least last year it was harder to get into Juilliard than MIT or Oxford. The process is a months-long intensive review that culminates in a final day. There's technical review, live auditions, written submissions, reference checks. And while they do reserve time for a traditional interview, it's only 1 hour of what is otherwise months and months of work. At NASA, a staggering 18,300 people applied this year to become one of America's next astronauts. There's literally not enough time to phone screen even a third of those applicants. The final 3-day gauntlet has an intellectual test, psychometric tests, lots of live simulations, What they're trying to do is understand if the applicant has what it takes. They're not asking the person about his or her opinion. They want to watch the work live. For those of you who are familiar with the NFL, you know that their talent audition is called the Combine. This is where coaches and scouts gather every year to watch the NCAA's best athletes compete. They're looking for very discrete things. They're testing the 40-yard dash, high jump. They'll watch the players throw the ball, catch the ball, run the ball. They even have something called the Wonderlick, which tests football IQ. We're not going to talk about that concept today. But something that's very interesting about the Combine, they've done such a good job branding this, the Combine has fans of its own. Could you imagine someone coming to your offices to watch one of your interviews? Would they pay for a ticket? You might find it interesting that people actually show up to Citadel's Datathons to watch the students compete. So, as we think about these elite institutions, why aren't they leveraging the traditional interview alone? Some would say it's the time, others would say it's the cost. But the data shows us why. Traditional interviews are largely ineffective in their ability to predict future on-the-job performance. On the left-hand side, you see a study from the Journal of Organizational Behavior that shows the correlation coefficient between an assessment tool and its ability to predict on-the-job performance. The casual one-on-one interview scores at the bottom of the list. On the right-hand side, just a few authors who have published on the topic. The first is a book called Who, written by the founders of GH Smart, a talent solutions and advisory company. They've studied over 4,000 employee cases and found that the one-on-one casual interview is largely a random predictor of on-the-job success. In Friedman's book, The Best Place to Work, he makes a simple assertion. 81% of candidates lie during their interviews. Now, I know none of you lied during your interviews. This is the 19%. But in all seriousness, we need to ensure that as talent professionals, we deliver a quality experience for our hiring managers. And the traditional interview, although it is very good for some things, can't be the only tool in our toolkit while we're doing that. So in the spirit of the Datathon and of Talent Auditions, I want to show you and not tell you.
Data is both a reflection of the world and its driver. It's how we measure what is, predict what will come, and explore what can be. To do this, you need more than machines. You need minds. The Data Open is where the best intellectual athletes come to compete.
It was a good learning experience.
I really enjoyed the teamwork today. It was really fun.
A way to use data science to improve the world.
Congratulations to team number 16 from the University of Chicago.
Our Datathons are talent auditions for quants and data scientists. For those of you who aren't as familiar with the field, these are statisticians, technologists, mathematicians, engineers, physicists, and other disciplinary areas where students are going to form the future of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and financial markets. This talent market is completely broken from a supply and demand perspective. We're competing with the world's best technology companies, finance companies, academia, and folks like yourselves to land this talent. So we had to approach the problem in a very dynamic way. Our marketing team uses a very particular mix of things to deploy so we can attract this young talent to our auditions. We, of course, use social media, on-the-ground techniques, and we're also testing new and novel things to get these students to come to our events. This year, we just released a chatbot that actually dynamically engages the student without a human recruiter working with it and actually pulls them into the process. So we're deploying new tactics, testing those things real time, and figuring out what works. One of the most attractive things for the students is the cash prize that they win at the end of the event, and that certainly helps bring them into the room. When we aggregate the talent, what we're doing is thinking about all of the observable behaviors, measures, and metrics we want to watch before they come in, during the event, and after the event. It's a systemized and surgical talent process that we very carefully architected. What we find is that it also allows us to unleash the talent brand in a very, very fun, engaging, and unique way. So let me tell you a little bit more about the day of the event. So imagine it's 8 a.m., you're outside a large conference room, probably an area where the students are very familiar, where they take class. They're trickling in. Some of them are fantastically tired and groggy. Others are exceptionally over-caffeinated. They're very excited about the competition. They all have backpacks on because they need laptops to compete. The most eager people wheel in desktop PCs for more computing power. At 9 a.m., we open the competition and a problem statement is released. Vast data sets are transmitted to the students instantaneously. The energy in the room picks up. They're talking about the work. They're thinking about who's going to clean the data, who's going to structure it, who's going to write the statistical model, who's going to run the tech and the code, who's going to write the paper, and do we have enough time? The energy is tremendous. Throughout the day, they have their heads down and they are working absolutely breakneck pace. By the end of the day, the room is eerily quiet. The students are squeezing the last minutes and seconds that they have out of the allotted time. You can cut the tension with a knife. At the end of the competition, papers are instantaneously anonymized and submitted to judges. They're going to go through a 2-hour intensive technical review. We'll understand how the students write, how they code, how they program, how they think. When the judges come back, all eyes are glued on the front of the room. The judges are holding a jumbo check. The winner is announced, and the room is filled with cheer, joy, and sheer disappointment. The winners come to the front and present their findings. At the end of the competition, the work really starts for our talent professionals. They've been observing. They've been watching who's going to lead the team, who's going to follow, who's going to do the work, who will pick up the marker and actually go to the whiteboard. They'll dig through the code. They'll look through the papers. And ultimately, what they'll be able to do is serve a rich, rich picture to the hiring manager and assessment team in a hyper-leveraged fashion. We've found that Citadel's Datathons have been fantastically successful for us, and we think that you can probably design and build a talent audition of your own. But we're not the only company out there doing this. At Automatic, a small firm on the West Coast, they use tryouts. They bring candidates into their professional pipeline and pay them to do real work. They don't ask them how they do their work or to describe situations where they did the work. They get real sample. They can take the time to assess that work product. At Menlo in Ann Arbor, Michigan, they call their talent audition extreme interviewing. They bring in pairs of candidates and one assessor. Those 3 people will sit in the room together for 30 minutes. The 2 individuals are going to go back and forth live and create a creative output. The assessor's looking for whether the person across the table from you can bring the best out in you, and the same of the other candidate. After 30 minutes, they'll flip sides and do it again. Another 30 minutes later, they'll bring in new candidates and new assessors. They'll have 3 opportunities to do this, and only the best candidates are elevated and invited to come back for a week-long project with Menlo. I outline these 2 because these are what work for Automatic and Menlo, and you need to think about what will work for you. So I want you to think about 4 key things. 4 things if you think this approach can work for you. You have to design your talent audition within the barriers and constraints of your organization. These come in all shapes and sizes. 2, it's all about data and metrics. Remembering back to our combine example, the astronaut example, think about the observable measures and behaviors that you care about. Structure your audition so you can collect that information systematically. 3, creativity is critical. You have to magnetize the candidates. That's a function of your creativity, the capital you'll deploy, and the strength of your talent brand relative to the pool of applicants that's most important to you. Think about those levers as different things that you can pull. Finally, you have to have the organizational bandwidth to pull this off. This is not something that you can do on nights and weekends. You need a carved-out, dedicated effort or team internally, or you can leverage an outside partner. At Citadel, we're working with a talent solutions company called Correlation One, and they've been fantastic partners along this journey. So again, we've found that talent auditions work really well for us. It's a very unique and new approach to magnetizing talent in your most important talent pipelines and pools and attracting them to your company so you can structure an on-the-job simulation and learn as much as you want about that candidate. So I want to thank all of you for your time today, and I'm inviting all of you to stop interviewing and start auditioning. Work smarter. Thank you. I would love it if people would come up to the mic and ask some questions. And then at the end of the Q&A, we'll also do a quick little exercise. So does anyone have questions about talent auditions, pipeline hiring, or magnetizing talent and electrifying your talent brand? The microphones are right in the middle.
First of all, great job. I have a quick question, and that's about assessment. So with the work you're doing at my company, we're also doing some simulation type work, but very small scale and more with like interns, right? But what I'd like to understand is we also do a lot of leadership assessment work. Do you embed that as part of the process?
I think it's a great question. When we think about leadership assessment, that happens across many, many dimensions of how we assess talent. There are certain roles where we're looking for proven managers and proven leaders. In this context, when we're assessing junior talent and students, we're more looking for the potential to lead in the future, not necessarily observable behaviors or demonstrated leadership. But as I said, at the end of these auditions, it's very, very clear to us who was leading the work, who was driving the work, who was the real idea generator. So in so much as that is an early indication of leadership, we're absolutely looking at it.
So really, primarily, you're using this more at the entry-level students?
The Datathons, as an example, are only for students right now, though we think that they do have the potential to scale to young professional. On the senior end, what we do is a much more localized assessment where we offer case studies to our candidates. So we'll have candidates come in and go through 3-hour exercises and work through real simulations to get a sense for how they think.
And then you teased us with pipelining, so do you want to talk about that?
Sure. What do you want me to talk about?
Well, what are you doing in the area of pipelining? Because I think we all want to crack the code on how do you pipeline talent, right?
Yeah, my sense is that pipelining can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, so let's frame that up. When I think about a talent pipeline, I think about a couple of things. It's usually a perpetual need for the business, so it's either aligned to the front office or a mission-critical back office function. And pipelining, I think, has to be completely linked to your talent brand. And so when you think about talent brand in the context of what we do in financial markets and technology, it's critical for us to get an edge as early as possible. Citadel, unlike many of the firms out there who we compete with for talent, doesn't have a retail brand or a consumer brand that students can naturally gravitate to. And so when I think about pipelining, I think about unleashing the talent brand as early as possible and engaging students in a very, very good and authentic way. I think about showing them what the work is really like. I think authenticity is a really, really important thing these days, especially with the generation we're talking about. You have to show them what the work is like, and actually one of the best benefits of the Datathon is that students get to try their hand at data science. They get a sense for what it means to build statistical models, and for some small percentage of them, I don't think they really like it. And I think that's beautiful because then they can go and actually pursue something that they're way more passionate about. Good questions. Sure.
Oh, thanks. Two-part question. So first of all, how do you track all of this data and rank it so that you're not losing this data? You have a massive pool of candidates there and you're only hiring for some of them, but do you still keep this data? How do you track that working with Correlation One as the vendor to make sure that this data stays relevant? And do you see a repeat of maybe you didn't hire them this time around? How do you revisit these candidates?
Yeah, great question. It's a mix of Post-it notes and napkins on my desk and write everything down. Look, we've had over 10,000 students sign up for our Datathon, so it's an excellent question. At the very, very tip of the spear in the front of the funnel, we have a proprietary system that we use. So we have an internal technology that is both a front-end applicant tracking system, but it extends beyond that and actually operates as a CRM.
Was it built specifically with this in mind?
No.
Okay.
No. But I think if we take the question at a different angle, I would just say in concept, it's absolutely critical that you've answered this question before you start your mission. Yeah. If you don't, it'll mostly probably be a mess of data that you can't make sense of. We've iterated on the front end of the process and structured our fields and our information a couple of times, but one of the key design steps is really thinking through, again, what do I want to measure, at what stage, and how will I collect that information and then put it into a real work product that my hiring manager can actually use. So whether you need a candidate dossier that gives an overview of what that candidate is like, or you just want aggregate funnel metrics to be able to report on, you have your internal goals and objectives. You need to really think through what those are and structure your experiment accordingly.
And then the second part of that, given the probably extreme upfront cost of something like this, what are the key metrics that you use to value this, to make the business case for doing these?
Yeah. Look, I think coming back to one of the earlier questions, this works really well with high volume pipelines where the talent you're looking for is critical to the success of your business. I wouldn't do this for a role that wasn't central to the organization, because I think making the case is just hard. And to your point, I think the upfront burden is probably too great. What I think you need to do is get internal alignment up and down the chain, right? You actually need to ensure that not only is the head of talent acquisition, head of human capital, all the business leaders who care about this talent perfectly aligned, you actually have to get alignment from your own teams. For those of you who are leading teams of recruiters, this is very foreign. It's very different. And if you don't get alignment with those folks and get them energized by the prospect of, to your point, doing a ton more work, things can become really problematic.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Justin, this is great. Thank you very much. So I lead executive recruiting for Charles Schwab. So we're talking about financial services, different market. I know you just mentioned the high volume, which makes more sense. But we're finding, even at the executive level, which is a very small percentage of our overall employee base, just the regular rigmarole interviewing isn't hacking anymore. So we've tried a couple different styles. Feels more like homework than any sort of real audition. When you've been doing this research, I know there's a bit of a schism here when we're talking about these two types of things, but has there been some, have you found in the research or when you've been working on this, transposing this onto other things that are not as high volume, not as data driven, and more, but has as severely of an impact on the business?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. When I think about the prospect of using talent auditions on senior hires, I think that this type of a model, this literal model, presents many challenges. Sure. So I've thought a lot about it, and I wouldn't structure it that way. Candidate anonymity, for one, is a huge thing in senior executive hiring, so I don't think that this has really good applications there. I also think that when you're talking about getting people's time, junior talent tend to have a little bit more free time, especially if they're unemployed students. Yeah. And so for senior executives, what we do, at least in the context of our investing businesses, is we deploy those case studies that I talked about. The other thing we do is we do not rely on traditional interviews alone. Right. We put a lot of emphasis, and the senior hiring team at Citadel is excellent at this, on structuring their interviews. Everyone has a role, everyone has a responsibility, and when you're building out that casework and looking for that real work product, you can have a lot of fun with it and push and pull on the various dimensions.
Yeah, it's exciting. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, cheers. Hi.
Sorry. So how long have you been doing these like data open? How long have you guys been doing it?
We started in November of 2016, so we're coming up on 1 year.
So from your first one, what were some significant learnings that you had after the first one that you completed that you implemented the second time around?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think one of the most important things you need to do is build an ecosystem where you can learn. The importance of understanding your failures and learning from those mistakes is just critical, I think, whenever you're innovating. I could name a few. They're somewhat comical. Make sure students have name tags. That's an important one. You'd be shocked how critical young students are of the food you feed them. So there are a couple of little trivial things. One of the things that was really interesting, and we still haven't cracked the code on this, our Datathons are really, really hard. They're really fantastically challenging. Oftentimes we have 1 or 2 teams leave in the middle because it's too difficult. And on one hand, I actually like that. The work we do is challenging. We're under extreme time constraints and pressure. And I like it that people feel that. On another level, I want everyone to have a really good experience. And really dialing up and dialing down how hard the data sets are is something we've thought a ton about. One thing we very purposely do is we often don't make the topic related to finance or financial services. We make it a much more approachable data set or topic. Maybe it's about transportation or housing markets or something like that. But if I take your question from a different level, look, we understood the importance of learning from our mistakes very early on. And if I tie it back to the person who asked a question a couple minutes ago, when we got aligned with senior management on the initiative, one of the things we did was we said very explicitly, we're going to go out and we're going to beta test. We're going to learn. We don't yet know what's going to come to us. And I think that's been a really, really important dialogue with our senior leadership. And it's something that's helped us be really successful.
Was it easy to get the senior leadership group to buy in to this idea initially?
I think it was easy to get senior leadership to buy into the notion of innovation. stepping them through what we were going to do needed to be logical and thoughtful, and we needed evidence and data to support what we were doing. And so at the very beginning, we didn't announce that we were doing 20 Datathons nationwide and trying to attack this huge talent pool. We said, we want to test something. We boxed it off, and we said, hey, we want to learn on one small incubation initiative. And then once that went well, we built the case and we did a few more. When that went well, we made the case even bigger and did even more.
Thank you.
Good questions, thank you. Let me ask another quick question because we only have 10 minutes left. Does anyone in the room think that this could work for them? Is anyone in the room willing to step up to the mic and talk with me live about how we could design something for your firm right now? All right, you're next. Thank you. So I'll take your questions, and then we're going to go through back and forth in a live simulation. Show me, don't tell me. And we're going to talk about how to build a talent audition. Yeah?
She kind of touched on it, but when it comes to buy-in, you talked a little bit about the data that you had and how you got buy-in. But did you kind of jump, you mentioned you just went and did kind of a bit of a beta test. So when did you kind of switch? Did you use an external company right away? I mean, even the upfront kind of cost of that is a lot. So is there anything else you did in the interim that's a little bit more tangible without kind of going to the extreme of finding all these data sets, really building out this case study that you can do to kind of implement some of these things, but not so immediate with those costs? Did you do anything along those lines?
Well, I think that the other thing that we did that I could have answered to the previous question was we studied what was happening in the market. When you look out in the talent market, while we think we've created something super innovative and very unique, the concept of talent auditions, as I said, has been around for a long time. And there are lots of companies doing similar things. So as you build your case, you can build your beta test, and then in parallel, you have to do your homework and do the research. If there's a proof of concept out there that you can leverage, it certainly makes those conversations internally a lot easier.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, let's do one more, and then we'll build something.
Mine should be quick.
Good.
I know you've already done this through trial and error, and I know in talent acquisition, we all experience difference in timing. From your experience, when has been the best time for rising graduates? When has the time worked best for your talent auditions? Like, has there been a certain time of year that has worked best?
Yeah. Look, I think that anyone who's running a campus program right now realizes the talent comes off the market earlier and earlier each year. And so if you're hiring people in May, I think you're very far behind. I think that going in the fall makes a lot of sense, and we're actually going to be running, I believe, 8 or 10 of these this fall. We did a handful in the spring as well. One of the key learnings we had was that getting students to come to the event on Saturday is actually a big win for everyone. It doesn't compromise academics and pull them out of class, which is very important to us at Citadel. And for the right kind of student, they're actually pretty interested in that intellectual exercise. I will warn you that if you do it Saturday, your drop-off rate is a little bit higher than if you did it on a different day. And so you should expect 10 or so % of the students to not show up. Yeah, thank you. Okay, what's your name? Where are you from?
Marilyn Procaccini, and I'm from Lockheed Martin. I'm Director of Executive Recruiting, but I've also ran talent acquisition.
Well, thank you so much. Can we give her a hand? Super brave. Okay, let's talk about how this could work for you.
Well, in fairness to you, I probably need to tell you that we run something similar.
Excellent.
But we do it at the high school level. So we have something called Code Quest, and it's a weekend competition for high school students in their sophomore through senior year of high school. And then our award is college money for them too. But it's only done within our IT department, within not our engineers, it's information technology group right now. So what I was intrigued by was how big yours is, and could we expand it to, we have 60,000 engineers and we hire 5,000 a year out of college campuses. So could we expand something like this?
Well, what's working well and what's working poorly?
Well, in terms of college hiring or in CodeQuest?
In CodeQuest, in terms of how you're structuring this, what would you like to do differently? How are you thinking about it?
Well, we started, probably 4 years ago with just one region out of Denver, Colorado, one site, and now we've expanded to 10 different locations throughout the country. So we've grown over 4 years, but it's small. I think if we have 500 students doing it, that's probably saying a lot. But it works well, and it's designed by our IT leaders. They designed the project.
It sounds like a great program. When I think about that kind of a thing and the volume you have, I wonder whether or not you might expand that and do something more virtually. There's something wonderful about doing a live and embodied event because you get to see the team dynamics, which is just mission critical for us at Citadel. But as you think about your talent auditions and whether this could work for you, creating simulated environments doesn't always need to be a live exercise. So that's something I would think about. If you're thinking about expanding, I think it's wonderful that you guys at Lockheed are doing it at the high school level. Getting your talent brand out there is probably critical because most high school students wouldn't have heard of Lockheed Martin, given their exposure to the company in aerospace and defense and all that you do. I wonder whether you have an opportunity to actually expand beyond the technology platform, because when you think about what you're doing, it sounds a lot like a pretty traditional hackathon, but I don't know.
It's similar. It is really a hackathon. I mean, that's how it's designed to go after. But we don't turn it into hires either, too. I mean, we give money. I mean, we're hoping we get them to be interns, but we don't know long-term if they'll be hires yet. So that's why I was really intrigued by what you're doing.
Yeah, my sense is that, and coming back to the person who asked the question about the talent pipeline earlier, connecting the tissue from high school to college to young professional is something that I always think about, because I think that candidate journey is one principally early on of education, where they're learning about not only your company and what you do, but what's it going to be like for me to work. I've never worked before, for many of them anyway, at least not in a professional context. And as they grow and start to educate themselves, right, thinking back to their first experience with your talent brand and linking it back, because as you know, maybe they'll get hired right out of their internship, or maybe they'll come back around 8 years later.
Now, are you doing yours at multi-sites, one site, and how many people are coming when you do it?
So when we run our Datathons, we usually have anywhere from 500 to 650 students sign up. We only have 100 slots at each Datathon, so we have our pick of the top candidates. And we'll have that at a local university. If it's a really, really good regional opportunity, we'll invite multiple schools. So at our Harvard Datathon 2 weeks ago, we had 60 students from Harvard, 30 from MIT, and a number from neighboring schools. When we're in Pittsburgh, we're mostly only talking with Carnegie Mellon and a handful of students from Pitt.
And then how do you advertise it? Like, how do you get those students to sign up?
We're using social. We're going boots on the ground at campus and putting out flyers. And then we use geo-targeting and other micro-targeting techniques to put the chatbot and other attraction mechanisms in front of them. But when you offer unemployed students a cash prize, they usually tend to show up.
And just one other, how many of you hired from each session?
We've hired dozens of students from the initiative, but we're really just getting started right now. The spring cycle, when we kicked off, we went through and made a number of hires, but we're probably most excited about what's happening right now. So as I said, we were at Harvard and MIT last week, Princeton and Penn in parallel. We have Caltech and Stanford coming up, and then we're hopping over the pond to go to Oxford and Cambridge. And the business has been super excited and super eager, because our internal hiring managers and interviewers can show up to the event. Maybe they're a proud alumni and can support the alma mater, but they just have a ton of fun with these.
And one other, how would you work this with XPro?
Pardon me?
Like, how would you do it with the experienced professional? Have you tried that at all yet?
Not with our Datathons. I think it would work really, really well, for junior talent. I think you do need to work through some of the anonymity things we talked about before and preserve that candidate's anonymity, especially if they don't want to step out into the crowd and let it be known that they're searching. At the same time, this really changes the dynamics. We're not offering the prospect of a job alone, right? What we're doing is offering an opportunity for people to compete. And so they can come in pretty freely and compete for that cash prize. They understand that there's also the prospect of the job, but it's not that alone. I want to thank everyone for your time. This has been a lot of fun. Please step up and ask more questions if you have them. Thanks to our awesome marketing team and our campus team for making our Datathons real. Thanks, guys.